I sank 750,000, every penny I had, into an abandoned ranch chasing a dream of freedom. But when the HOA raided my land, demanding I join their club, I knew I'd have to fight to keep what was mine. Ever had an HOA try to run your life? Share your story in the comments. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Phone, computer, or TV? My name's Mike Johnson, and at 50 I was done with the city grind. 30 years in a corporate cubicle, staring at spreadsheets until my eyes blurred, had me dreaming of wide open spaces. I wasn't some starry-eyed kid. I'd saved every bonus, skipped vacations, and lived lean to build that nest egg. When I saw the listing for a 100-acre ranch just outside Austin, Texas, going cheap at auction, I knew it was my shot. The place was a wreck, abandoned for years, but I could see it: rolling fields, a creaky barn, my own slice of freedom. I bid everything I had, 750,001. The day I got the keys, I drove out in my beat-up pickup, the kind that rattles like it's got a grudge. The ranch was exactly as advertised, a glorious mess. The farmhouse sagged like an old man after a long day, its paint peeling in strips. The barn leaned slightly, as if whispering, "Fix me if you dare." Fences were more splinters than posts, and the fields were a tangle of weeds taller than me. But standing at the rusty gate, staring across those 100 acres, I felt alive for the first time in decades. This was mine. No boss, no commute, no HOA telling me how to mow my lawn. Or so I thought. I'd heard whispers about the new upscale development a mile down the road. Big houses, bigger egos, the kind of place where folks name their dogs after wine brands. They'd formed a homeowners association, the kind that measures your grass with a ruler and fines you for unapproved mailbox colors. I figured they'd stick to their cul-de-sacs, leaving my ranch alone. After all, my property was rural, outside their tidy little kingdom. I was here to rebuild, to coax this land back to life, maybe even run a few cattle someday. I wasn't hurting anyone. The first week I slept on a cot in the farmhouse, the kind of place where every floorboard creaks a story. I spent my days exploring, mapping out what needed fixing. The barn held a rusty tractor, half buried in dust, but I could get it running. The well still pumped clean water, a small miracle. I made lists: patch the roof, clear the brush, mend the fences. It was daunting, but I'd never felt so free. No emails pinging, no meetings to fake smile through. Just me, the land, and a dream I'd bet everything on. Then, on day 10, I found a letter tacked to my gate. Not mailed, not delivered, tacked like some medieval proclamation. It was from the HOA, all official letterhead and legalese, welcoming me to the community. They claimed my ranch fell under their jurisdiction and invited me to join. Membership mandatory, they said. Monthly dues $500. Rules included painting my barn, community approved colors, and submitting my landscaping plans for review. I laughed out loud, standing there in the dust. An HOA for a ranch. What's next? Telling me how to stack my hay. I tossed the letter on my desk in the farmhouse, figuring it was a mix-up. Maybe they thought my land was part of their subdivision. I'd call them later, clear it up. I had bigger problems, like the raccoon living in my chimney. But as I hammered nails into a sagging fence that afternoon, an uneasy feeling settled in. The letter's tone wasn't neighborly. It was demanding, like they already owned me. I glanced toward the horizon, where the HOA's shiny rooftops glinted in the distance. Freedom, I was learning, came with a fight. That night, I sat on the porch, sipping coffee from a tin mug, the stars brighter than I'd ever seen in the city. I thought about the life I'd left behind, the savings I'd poured into this place. I wasn't just fighting for land. I was fighting for the right to live on my terms. If this HOA thought they could bully me into their rule book, they'd picked the wrong rancher. I'd worked too hard, risked too much, to let some clipboard-wielding busybodies take it away. Tomorrow I'd start fixing the barn. But I'd also keep an eye on that gate. Something told me this wasn't the last I'd hear from them. But I never expected their first move to be so bold. The sun was barely up, painting the Texas sky in streaks of pink, when I started my day on the ranch. I'd been at it for 2 weeks now, my hands already calloused from yanking weeds and hauling splintered fence posts. That 100-acre spread outside Austin was starting to feel like home, even if the farmhouse groaned every time the wind kicked up. I had big plans: fix the fences, get that rusty tractor in the barn running, maybe plant a small garden by spring. My life savings, $750,000, were sunk into this place, and I wasn't about to let it stay the dilapidated mess I'd bought at auction. This was my shot at freedom, and I was all in. That morning, I was wrestling with a tangle of briars near the gate, my gloves doing little against the thorns. The work was brutal but honest, the kind that makes you sleep like a rock. I'd almost forgotten about the HOA's ridiculous letter, the one tacked to my gate like a bad joke, demanding I join their club and paint my barn to match their community aesthetics. I'd chuckled, tossed it on my desk in the farmhouse, and figured I'd call their office to sort out the mix-up. My ranch was rural, a good mile from their manicured lawns and matching mailboxes. They had no claim on me, or so I thought. Around noon, I headed to the farmhouse for a break, wiping sweat from my brow. That's when I saw it, a crisp, certified letter wedged in the screen door, the kind that screams trouble. I tore it open, expecting a utility bill or some county paperwork. Instead, it was from the HOA again, this time on fancier letterhead, signed by someone named Karen Mitchell, president. The words hit like a slap. As a property within our jurisdiction, you are required to join the Homeowners Association immediately. Monthly dues of $500 are due by the 15th. Compliance with community standards, including exterior color schemes and landscaping approval, is mandatory. Failure to comply will result in legal action. I stood there, rereading it, my jaw tight. Jurisdiction, I muttered. This is a ranch, not a subdivision. I laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that masks a growing pit in your stomach. The letter listed rules straight out of a dystopian novel. No unsightly vehicles. My pickup was apparently a crime. No excessive livestock. I didn't even have any yet, and a requirement to submit my barn's paint color for approval. I pictured some suit in their gated community sipping Chardonnay while deciding my barn should be Sage Whisper instead of good old red. I didn't know HOAs sent fan mail to ranches. I quipped to the empty porch, but the humor didn't stick. I tucked the letter into my desk drawer, next to the first one, and tried to shake it off. I had work to do. The tractor in the barn was calling, a 1960s relic caked in rust, but with a frame solid enough to salvage. I spent the afternoon prying off corroded bolts, the clank of my wrench echoing in the cavernous barn. But my mind kept drifting back to that letter. Why were they so insistent? My ranch predated their neighborhood by decades. I'd checked the auction paperwork. No covenants, no restrictions. This was free land bought clean. Yet the OA's tone wasn't asking, it was ordering, like they already had me cornered. By evening, I was back on the porch, coffee in hand, staring across the fields. The stars were out, sharp against the black, but the peace I'd felt a week ago was fraying. I pulled out my phone and did some digging. A quick search turned up stories of HOAs overreaching, harassing farmers and rural landowners with baseless claims. One Reddit thread described a farmer in Oklahoma who got sued by an HOA for not joining, even though his land wasn't part of their development. The comments were a mix of outrage and dark humor. HOAs are the Karens of real estate. One read. I smirked, but the stories hit close. These groups had money, lawyers, and a knack for making life hell. I thought about calling the OA's office, but something told me a phone call wouldn't cut it. This wasn't a clerical error. They were testing me, seeing if I'd roll over. I wasn't some city slicker they could bully with fines and legalese. I'd spent 30 years climbing the corporate ladder, dodging office politics sharper than any HOA board meeting. If they wanted a fight, I'd give them one. But first, I needed to know my ground. Tomorrow I'd head to the county clerk's office, pull my property records, and make sure my deed was ironclad. Freedom, I was learning, wasn't just owning land, it was defending it. As I locked the farmhouse for the night, I glanced at the gate, half expecting another letter to appear by morning. The ranch was quiet, the only sound the distant hum of crickets. But I knew this was just the start. The HOA had made their move, and it was bolder than I'd ever imagined. They didn't know it yet, but they'd just woken a sleeping rancher. Then they crossed the line, storming my land like they owned it. 3 weeks into my new life on the 100-acre ranch outside Austin, I was starting to find my rhythm. The Texas sun beat down as I hammered new boards into the fence line. My $750,000 life savings taking shape with every nail. The farmhouse still creaked, the barn still housed that rusty tractor I hadn't quite tamed, but the land was coming alive. I'd cleared enough brush to see the bones of the property. Rolling fields that could one day hold cattle or crops. Freedom tasted like sweat and dust, and I was hooked. But the HOA's certified letter, demanding I join their club and pay $500 a month, sat heavy in my farmhouse desk drawer. I'd meant to visit the county clerk to confirm my deed, but between repairs and a stubborn well pump, I hadn't gotten to it. I figured the HOA would back off once I sent a polite letter pointing out their mistake. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday morning, the air thick with late summer heat, when I heard tires crunching on the gravel road to my gate. I was in the barn, elbow deep in tractor grease, when the sound made me pause. Delivery trucks didn't come unannounced, and I wasn't expecting company. Wiping my hands on a rag, I stepped outside and saw them, 2 SUVs parked at my gate, a half-dozen people milling around, one woman in a blazer holding a clipboard like a weapon. Behind them, 2 burly guys in security uniforms stood with arms crossed, looking like they'd been hired to intimidate. My gut twisted. This wasn't a neighborly visit. I strode to the gate, my boots kicking up dust. The woman with the clipboard stepped forward, her smile as fake as a politician's promise. "Mr. Johnson, I'm Karen Mitchell, president of the Hilltop Estates Homeowners Association. We're here to inspect your property for violations, unapproved structures, excessive debris, that sort of thing." Her voice was all business, but her eyes sized me up like I was a tenant, not a landowner. I planted my feet. "Inspect my property? Mom, this is a private ranch, not part of your neighborhood. You've got no business here." My tone was calm, but my pulse wasn't. The security guys shifted, their hands resting on belts that probably held pepper spray. Karen's smile didn't budge. "I'm afraid you're mistaken. Your land falls within our expanded boundaries. We've notified you of your obligations. This inspection is standard procedure." She waved her clipboard, as if it gave her the right to march onto my 100 acres. Expanded boundaries, that was new. I crossed my arms, mirroring her security goons. "Lady, I've got a deed that says otherwise. You're not stepping foot past this gate." The group behind her, 3 men and another woman, all dressed like they'd just left a country club, muttered among themselves. One guy was snapping photos of my fence with his phone, like he was building a case. Karen's smile tightened. "Mr. Johnson, non-compliance will result in legal consequences. We're trying to be reasonable." She gestured at the barn, its weathered boards a stark contrast to their polished SUVs. "That structure, for instance, doesn't meet our aesthetic standards." I laughed, sharp and loud. "Aesthetic standards? This is a working ranch, not your gated community. You want to talk consequences? You're trespassing." I pulled out my phone, dialing the sheriff's office. "Let's see what the law says about your inspection." The standoff lasted 10 minutes, tense as a coiled rattler. Karen's crew hovered, her security guys glaring, but they didn't cross the gate. When the sheriff's deputy rolled up, a lanky guy named Daniels who looked like he'd rather be fishing, he heard me out, then turned to Karen. "Mom, unless you've got a court order, you've got no jurisdiction here. This land's outside your HOA. I suggest you leave." Karen's face soared, but she nodded, herding her group back to their SUVs. As they drove off, she leaned out her window. "This isn't over, Mr. Johnson." I waved, forcing a grin, but my hands were shaking. 2 days later, another certified letter arrived. This one wasn't an invitation. It was a threat. The HOA claimed my ranch was subject to a recent zoning change that put it under their authority. They demanded I join by month's end or face a lawsuit to enforce compliance. The letter cited fines, liens, even the possibility of seizing my land if I didn't pay up. I read it twice, my coffee going cold. Zoning change. That was nonsense. I checked the county records before buying, but nonsense with lawyers behind it could still ruin me. I sat on the porch that night, the stars hidden by clouds. The HOA wasn't just overreaching, they were playing dirty, banking on me folding under pressure. I'd heard stories like this, OAs bullying non-members with legal threats, hoping to wear them down. One article I'd found online described a farmer in Nevada who lost his land to legal fees fighting a similar claim. My $750,000 dream was on the line, and I wasn't about to let Karen and her clipboard brigade take it. Tomorrow, I'd get to the county clerk, pull every record on my property, and find out what this zoning change was about. I wasn't just fighting for my ranch. I was fighting for my right to exist outside their rules. The gate where they'd stood felt like a battle line now. They'd crossed it once. I'd make damn sure they didn't do it again. That's when I turned their game against them, and they didn't see it coming. The HOA's raid on my 100-acre ranch outside Austin had lit a fire under me. Karen Mitchell and her clipboard crew storming my gate, claiming my land was theirs to inspect, was a wake-up call. Their latest letter, threatening a lawsuit over a fake zoning change, was still pinned to my farmhouse desk next to the first two. My $750,000 life savings were tied up in this ranch, and I wasn't about to let some power-hungry HOA bully me off my own property. I'd spent 30 years navigating corporate nonsense. I knew how to play hardball. It was time to fight back. The morning after the sheriff sent Karen's posse packing, I drove to the county clerk's office, my pickup rattling over the Texas backroads. The clerk, a wiry woman with glasses perched on her nose, pulled my property records in 10 minutes flat. The deed was clear. My ranch, bought at auction, predated the Hilltop Estates subdivision by decades. No OA covenants, no restrictions, and definitely no expanded boundaries. I asked about their so-called zoning change. She snorted. Ain't no zoning change out here in 20 years. They're blowing smoke. I left with certified copies of my deed and a map showing my land well outside their jurisdiction. It was my first weapon. Back at the ranch, I called Tom Reynolds, a local lawyer I'd found online. His website promised fierce defense for Texas landowners, and his gravelly voice on the phone didn't disappoint. I laid out the HOA's letters, the raid, and their legal threats. Tom didn't mince words. These OAs pull this stunt more than you'd think. Scare tactics to strong-arm folks into compliance. We'll slap 'em with a harassment suit if they keep it up. Start documenting everything. He agreed to take my case for a flat fee, a hit to my savings but worth it to protect my dream. His advice: batten down the hatches and gather evidence. I took that to heart. The next day, I drove to an electronics store in Austin and bought 4 security cameras, motion-activated, high-definition, the works. I spent the afternoon mounting them around the ranch, 1 at the gate, 2 along the fence line facing the HOA's development, and 1 covering the barn. My rusty tractor, still sitting in there, seemed to nod approval as I wired the system to a hard drive in the farmhouse. If Karen's crew came sniffing again, I'd have them on tape. I wasn't just defending my land, I was building a case. Sure enough, they didn't wait long. 3 days later, my phone pinged with a motion alert from the gate camera. I pulled up the feed and saw 2 HOA types, one of Karen's lackeys from the raid and a new guy in a polo shirt, poking around my fence. They weren't on my land, but they were close, snapping photos and pointing at my barn like it was a crime scene. I let it roll, the camera catching every move. The next night, another alert. This time, Karen herself, stumbling through the dark with a flashlight, peering over my fence. She tripped over a wire, nearly face planting, and I couldn't help but chuckle. Smile for the camera, I muttered, saving the footage. I wasn't just collecting evidence. I was going on the offensive. I uploaded the clips to a video sharing site, stitching them into a short montage titled, HOA's Ranch Invasion Caught Red-Handed. I kept it simple. A caption explaining the HOA's overreach, shots of their inspections, and Karen's glorious fence tumble as the grand finale. I posted it to a local community forum and a Texas landowners group on social media. By morning it had 1,000 views. By evening, 10,000 comments poured in. These OAs are out of control. Good for you, man. Fight the Karens. A few locals even stopped by the ranch, offering coffee and stories of their own HOA nightmares. I was no longer alone. The viral video was a jab, but I wasn't done. Tom had me draft a cease and desist letter, citing my deed, the sheriff's report from the raid, and Texas property law, which strongly favors landowners over HOAs. We mailed it certified to Karen's office, demanding they stop all contact and retract their zoning claim. Tom grinned over the phone. This'll make him sweat. They're used to folks caving, not fighting. He was prepping a countersuit for harassment, using my footage and the sheriff's report as ammo. Every step felt like reclaiming my ranch, board by board. By week's end, I was back in the barn, wrench in hand, coaxing the tractor's engine to sputter. The work grounded me, a reminder of why I'd bet everything on this land. But now I wasn't just fixing fences or dreaming of cattle. I was fortifying my freedom. The cameras blinked steadily outside, the deed sat safe in my desk, and the community's support buzzed on my phone. Karen and her HOA had underestimated me. They thought they could roll over a lone rancher with their lawyers and letters. Instead, they'd kicked a hornet's nest. As I locked the farmhouse that night, I glanced at the gate, now a symbol of my stand. The HOA's next move was coming. I could feel it. But this time I was ready. They'd played their game, and I was rewriting the rules. When the judge spoke, the OA's empire fell and my ranch rose. 6 months after I sank my $750,000 life savings into a 100-acre ranch outside Austin, I stood in a county courtroom, my boots polished but my nerves raw. The HOA's war against me, letters, raids, and lawsuits, had pushed me to the edge, but I'd fought back. My security cameras, viral video, and lawyer Tom Reynolds had turned the tide. Now it all came down to this: a judge's ruling on whether the Hilltop Estates HOA could force me to join their club or leave my ranch in peace. My deed, the sheriff's report, and footage of Karen Mitchell's trespassing were stacked in our favor, but I'd learned not to underestimate the HOA's gall. The courtroom was small, smelling of old wood and coffee. Karen sat across the aisle with her lawyer, a slick guy in a suit that cost more than my tractor. She avoided my gaze, her clipboard nowhere in sight. Tom stood beside me, his tie slightly crooked, whispering, "We've got this, Mike. They're grasping at straws." The judge, a no-nonsense woman with gray hair and sharper eyes, called the room to order. My heart pounded as Tom laid out our case. My ranch predated the HOA. Their zoning change was fiction, and their harassment, caught on camera, violated Texas law. He presented the deed, the sheriff's report from the gate standoff, and the video of Karen tripping over my fence, which drew a stifled chuckle from the gallery. Karen's lawyer countered with a flurry of jargon, claiming the OA's expanded boundaries were legitimate and my ranch's unsightly. State lowered their property values. He waved a stack of photos, my barn, my rusty tractor, my half-fixed fences, like they were evidence of a crime. The judge cut him off mid-sentence. "Counselor, where's the documentation for this zoning change?" His pause was deafening. "We're working on obtaining it," he stammered. The judge's eyes narrowed. "You're in my courtroom now. Produce it or move on." She didn't need long to decide. Mr. Johnson's property is not, and has never been, under the HOA's jurisdiction, she declared, her voice like a gavel. The claims of a zoning change are unsupported. The HOA's actions, unannounced inspections, trespassing, and baseless legal threats, constitute harassment. She dismissed their lawsuit, ordered them to cease all contact, and awarded me legal fees, a sum that'd keep my ranch afloat. As she banged her gavel, I exhaled for the first time in months. The gallery, locals who'd seen my video, clapped, and Karen's face turned the color of my barn's faded paint. Outside the courthouse, Tom slapped my shoulder. "You did it, Mike. They're done." I nodded, but my mind was already back on the ranch. Fences to mend, that tractor still waiting. Then came the twist I didn't see coming. As I headed to my pickup, 2 HOA members, not Karen, but a couple from the raid, approached looking sheepish. "Mr. Johnson," the woman said, "your ranch, it's got this rustic charm. Any chance you'd rent it out for events? Weddings maybe?" I blinked, half expecting a prank, but they were serious. They loved the open fields, the barn's weathered look, the freedom my land radiated, everything their subdivision lacked. That spark lit a fire. Over the next month, I poured my energy into Johnson's ranch retreats. I fixed the barn enough to host events, cleared a field for tents, and strung lights along the fence. My first booking was a wedding for a local couple, the bride raving about the authentic Texas vibe. More followed: corporate retreats, family reunions, even a barbecue festival. The irony was delicious. HOA folks, including some who'd glared at me during the raid, now paid to use my land, their guests praising the dusty charm Karen once called a violation. My cameras stayed up, just in case, but the ranch was no longer a battleground. It was a business, turning my $750,000 gamble into a legacy. The kicker came at my first big event, a sunset wedding with 200 guests. Karen showed up, dragged along by a neighbor who'd booked the place. She stood by the barn, arms crossed, muttering about dusty aesthetics, while guests danced under the stars. I caught her eye and raised my beer, grinning. She'd been ordered to apologize publicly in court, a moment I'd savored, but seeing her there, out of place on my turf, was sweeter. She left early, her heels sinking in the dirt. That night I sat on my porch, the ranch quiet except for crickets. The gate, once a war zone, stood open for guests. The tractor, finally running, waited in the barn for tomorrow's work. I thought back to the city, the cubicle, the life I'd left. They tried to steal my dream. I said to the stars, but I built a legacy. Never let anyone take what's yours. My coffee mug was empty, but my heart was full. The HOA had come for my ranch, but I'd turned their game into my triumph.